Well, welcome to Free Speech Zone once again. We've got a whole bunch of interesting stuff to talk about. Now, first of all, the latest thing in the news was that German airliner, Airbus 320, I think it was. What was it? Yeah, 320. It crashed on in the Alps in France. And I thought we'd play a little bit of that wreckage because, and I wasn't the only one who thought of this, but as soon as I saw that wreckage, what did you think of? Flight 93, right? Let's play this scene of the wreckage. Go ahead. Look at this. No matter where you look, everywhere you look, there's debris. There's little tiny pieces. The plane hit at a high rate of speed, just like Flight 93 did. Look at how much debris there is. Hill, over dale. And the blackened area presumably is where the fire was. I'm not sure. I wouldn't doubt it. They didn't tell us. I'm just surmising. But look at the debris. That's just absolutely incredible. Little pieces of people and airplanes spread over acres and acres and acres. Now we're going to go to the film of Shanksville. So wait until you see this. You know, the plane supposedly buried itself in a mine, and then supposedly we couldn't get it again. And then later on, about months later, we heard that they recovered 95%, but they won't tell us where it is, and we can't look at it. But go ahead and show us.
Meantime, investigators are
now,
digging in.
You can turn up the sound a little bit. This is the original. There you go, right there. Now that is all there is. That's it. It's amazing. Just that little bitty hole. It's only a few feet across. It doesn't even, you know, it's nowhere near as big as an airplane. Go ahead and let it roll a little more.
Eyes above Pennsylvania.
And you can see a little bit of smoke coming out of it. Not much going on. And you can see right there, there's a whole view. Now that's it. That's all there was. Just a little tiny bit of garbage. Now you see what the difference is. You see what we're talking about. The difference between a real crash and a fake crash, okay? I'm pretty sure that you could say 93 was a fake crash. Or at least part of it. It might have just been a little tiny piece of the airplane, the rest of it spread 8 miles around. I don't know. Okay, well, another thing that happened this week, or, well, in the last couple weeks, was an incredible thing. You know, here President Obama is trying to strike an historic nuclear peace treaty, a nuclear arms treaty with Iran, and coming very close to it. And then 47 senators decide to sabotage him and send a letter straight to Iran. Did you know that's treason? Anyway, go ahead and play. This is George Galloway. He'll tell you all about it.
What does that Republican letter, this Republican letter to Iran, say about U.S. foreign policy? Well, it says a number of things. The first thing that it says is that at least half of the United States Senate, or virtually half of the United States Senate, think that the Iranian leadership are idiots who don't know anything about American politics, which I'm here to tell you certainly ain't true. For example, the first paragraph reads, "It has come to our attention while observing your nuclear negotiations with our government that you may not fully understand our constitutional question, our constitutional system. Thus, we are writing to bring to your attention two features of our Constitution: the power to make binding international agreements and the different character of federal offices," just in case the Iranians were too stupid to read the United States Constitution, that the Iranian diplomats who have served there and viewed everything that's happening in the United States have absolutely no means of conveying that information to their government, that the New York Post of the Republic of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, at the United Nations, has somehow missed the nuance of American constitutional politics. So that's the first thing that it says about US foreign policy. that almost half of the senior house of the American Congress thinks that the leadership of the Islamic Republic of Iran are idiots. But the second thing is, for the American people, far more serious. This is essentially an attempted constitutional coup d'etat by almost half of the American Senate. And it is clearly orchestrated by the Israel lobby in the United States, which organized the visit of Netanyahu to that rapturous welcome from both houses of Congress, with only some 50 members of the entire Congress and Senate absent from the speech. It's clearly another reverberation of the Netanyahu visit. Why is it an attempted constitutional coup d'etat? Well, the American Constitution is very clear. It is the President of the United States who controls foreign policy. It is the elected President of the United States who negotiates treaties. And for any citizen of the United States, never mind a senator of the United States, to try to undermine and undercut the elected president of the country is not only unconstitutional, but constitutes treason. That's essentially what the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, said today. It's what a number of concerned citizens of the United States are going to say in a legal action to that effect. It's what hundreds of thousands of American citizens so far in the last 2 days have said in a petition. That this Republican letter is a direct, flagrant, brazen breach of the Nolan Act. The Nolan Act forbids any American from undermining the President of the United States and corresponding with a foreign power on behalf of the United States. The letter effectively is saying to the Iranian leadership, whatever you decide in negotiation with the President of the United States doesn't matter a damn, because our President will be gone soon, and with the stroke of a pen, the next President will simply countermand him. And in any case, they are saying in this letter, anything that President Obama negotiates with you will be undermined by us. In other words, it's a kind of declaration of war. It's certainly a declaration that President Barack Obama is a dead duck. Now, the hatred of Obama in the United States has always been there. It is now distinctly more palpable. It's partly because he's black. Trust me on that. It's partly because he's a Democrat. It's partly because he doesn't like Netanyahu and Netanyahu doesn't like him. It's partly because he plainly prefers peace with Iran rather than war with Iran. It's for many, many reasons. But we are today as close as we have been probably for 50 years or more to outright rebellion within the United States governing circles against their own president. These are two of the things that this letter means.
Okay, well, yeah, so that I figured I'd play that one first because it's more timely. Now we're going to go to Jesse Ventura, and he's going to be talking about, basically our perpetual war authorized by the AUMF. That's the Authorization for the Use of Military Force. And, as if it wasn't bad enough just writing us a blank check to go kill anybody in the Middle East, they decided that it needed to be renewed and made more specific. They want to name it after ISIS now. They want to target ISIS specifically in the legislation. Anyway, go ahead and play Jesse, and I'll be right back.
This law was enacted in response to 9/11, but 14 years later, it's still got us chained to the Middle East. Which law am I talking about? I'm talking about the AUMF. But what exactly is it? Let's go to Brigida in the command center for a new segment titled Government 101. Take it away, Brigida.
All right, Governor, AUMF stands for the Authorization for Use of Military Force. This law was enacted by Congress back in 2001 in response to the September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. The law granted President Bush the authority to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons that planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks on September 11th. Its purpose was to prevent future acts of international terrorism against the United States.
And as usual, I'll make the statement, it's now being abused. Anything that may have been a good idea initially will generally end up abused. They're using it for an excuse to go to war anywhere they want to go, and they feel it's authorized because of this particular law that was enacted solely for 9/11. It's already been done 9/11, so how can it be used continually today? It's time to pull this law, go back to the old days where if we're going to war, not only does the president have to approve it, so does Congress.
Prior to enacting this law, a president could only use military force against nations, not persons or terrorist groups. A year after the 2001 law was passed, another was signed into effect, authorizing military force against Iraq to protect America from weapons of mass destruction and liberate the people of Kuwait. These AUMFs have been in place ever since. Well, Governor, now after hearing this, do you think the laws were necessary?
Well, they may have been necessary at that time, I don't know. It's now 14 years later, and they're still using this 14-year-old law to conduct their warfare. I think it's high time that that law be sunsetted, be repealed, whatever they got to do, and let's go back to the old way. And I don't care. These police actions are war. They are war. When our military's involved and it's a foreign country and there's shots fired, that is war.
Okay, well, it has been debated whether or not the wording of the 2002 authorization covers the threat of the Islamic State. So Obama submitted a new draft to Congress for a limited 3-year authorization specifically against ISIS and its associated forces. If approved, the new law will likely repeal the 2002 authorization against Iraq, but keep the 2001 authorization in place.
You know, they're going to do their bait and switch. They're going to do all this stuff for their ultimate goal. And if their ultimate goal is to go back to war over there, rest assured they will get there in some way, shape, or form. And by the time we're onto it, lawyers will fight about it for 5 years, and by then it'll all be over anyway. Isn't that unique?
The proposed draft is limited to 3 years, but if you actually read the fine print, you'll find a clause that says, this AUMF shall terminate 3 years after enactment unless reauthorized. So there you have it. The door remains wide open for a never-ending war. Governor, what is the point of even putting a limit on the AUMF if it can be extended?
Yeah, unless reauthorized. And how do they do that? An executive order? The president just reauthorizes it? I think we ought to know what's required in reauthorization. You know, they leave these things vague for a purpose, just like the welfare laws. They leave them vague and all that stuff so that they can be violated. People always love to blame the people on welfare or blame the illegal immigrants for violating when the problem is the people who write the laws. If they wouldn't leave the loopholes, they couldn't be violated. They're going to leave these loopholes so they can basically do anything they want and they don't have to clear it through the people.
And of course, this wouldn't be America if Congress wasn't allowed to disagree on the issue. According to the Washington Post, conservative hawks are attacking Obama's requests from the right, saying it would restrict the Pentagon too tightly, while liberal Democrats are attacking from the left, saying its limits are too loose to prevent another prolonged ground war. Who do you agree with, Governor? Do you agree with either party here?
I don't know whether I agree with one or the other. I don't understand why the Republicans would say it's too loose. I guess they want carte blanche. They'd like to have it for, what, a 15 or 20-year window? Are we a country of war? Well, we're going to find out, because the longer we keep continuing with policies like this, rest assured we will be in war. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out my audiobook, American
Sorry, I wasn't hooked in, and I'll get 15 demerits for that. I'm just going to show you here, you know, what is it that caused, what is it that enabled all of this mayhem and all of these horrible laws? Why, it was 9/11. And here's a poster from the New York, I think it was 2012 that they did this. I might be wrong about the date, but they actually hired, you know, the two beams you can understand for the Twin Towers. Most people don't know about Building 7. They added a third one so people would get to know about that. So anyway, right now we're going to go on, I'll put this aside, and we're going to go on right now with, since we're talking about laws and violating laws and you know, endless war in Iraq and Afghanistan, both of those were illegal wars. And just recently they had a conference on the George Bush administration. Now, there were people that tried to support the idea that it was illegal, all the wars that Bush fought were legal. But, well, watch this. This is the Real News Network, and they do a really good job.
At the George W. Bush Presidential Conference at Hofstra University, several former administration officials defended the legacy of the 43rd president and argued the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were legally just and carried out in the best interest of the American people. However, there were a few dissenting voices, among them author and scholar Phyllis Bennis. She's a fellow and the director of the New Internationalism Project at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C.
I wanted to start in discussing George W. Bush with a quote from someone who's always been a great heroine of mine, a woman named Diane Nash. Have people here heard of Diane Nash? I see some yeses. Diane Nash was a great hero of the civil rights movement. She was, at the age of, I think, 18 or 19, she was the one who really orchestrated the march in Selma 50 years ago. And last week, at the commemoration of the March on Selma, she was being honored in the front row of those who were going to march to commemorate that extraordinary experience. And at the last minute, she said this. She refused to march. And she said, and I quote, "I refused to march because George Bush marched." He was in the front row with her. "I think the Selma movement was about nonviolence and peace and democracy, and George Bush stands for just the opposite, for violence and war and stolen elections, and his administration had people tortured, so I thought that this was not an appropriate event for him." I think she was right. It was not an appropriate event for him. And it's actually, I think, a good thing that he's not here today, because this is not an appropriate event for him either. I would assert that the only public event that is appropriate today for George Bush and the others of his administration is to be on trial in The Hague for war crimes. And I think that when we look at war crimes, it's important that we look at it and interrogate it more thoroughly than I think we sometimes do. Both, in my view, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were illegal. In Afghanistan, the claim was made that this was a war for justice and for self-defense, when in fact it was about revenge and propaganda, partly to prepare the way for the coming war in Iraq, which was the primary war. It was illegal because it was not self-defense. Article 51 of the UN Charter is very specific about what self-defense is and is not. And among other things, it says that a country has the absolute right of self-defense until, the critical word, until the Security Council can meet and decide what to do about that particular crisis. Well, the Security Council met, as you will remember, those of you who aren't too young, and those of you too young to remember, I don't want to hear from you. The Security Council met within 24 hours of the attack on the Trade Center. The building was still smoldering. Diplomats had lost friends. Some had children in the area. It was a terrifying thing for people at the UN as well as everywhere else in New York, and for those of us in Washington as well. They would have, on that day, passed anything the US proposed. But the US did not propose an endorsement of the use of force. It was a very specific decision not to do that, not because it wouldn't have passed. It would have passed unanimously and with great fervor, as the resolution did, It called for a variety of things having to do with tracing the money and several other things, but it was not a resolution to be taken under the terms of Chapter 7, the criteria in the UN Charter that is the only basis for the use of force. And in that sense, it was not self-defense, and it did not meet the standard for self-defense in the United Nations. And of course, under Article 6 of the US Constitution, treaties are part of the law of the land. Treaties include the UN Charter. So that was clearly a violation. Whether or not the President makes a decision, Congress makes a decision, doesn't determine whether international law has been violated. And in this case, it was violated. In the question of Iraq, I would just say one other thing on the question of self-defense. If the US had managed to scramble a plane to take down the second plane that was about to crash into the towers, that would have been a legitimate use, horrific as it would be, a legitimate use of self-defense. Going to war 3 weeks later against a country on the other side of the world was not legitimate self-defense. In Iraq, we had many claims of why the war was legitimate. It was weapons of mass destruction. It was the possibility of nuclear weapons. It was the links to Al-Qaeda. It was yellow cake uranium. It was the aluminum tubes that could only be used for nuclear weapons. It was all these things. Well, as we know, none of those were true. It was a war fought for a host of other reasons. I'm not going to get into all of those reasons that have to do with power, the expansion of power, military bases, oil, and a host of other issues of resources and power. But I think that we do have to recognize that the region is more dangerous now because of the illegal wars waged by George W. Bush than would have been the case otherwise. And I think when we talk about war crimes, it's also important that we distinguish the war crimes that have to do with how wars are carried out from another kind of war crime. The crimes that have to do with how the war was carried out are more common in much of our discourse. So the issues of collective punishment, shock and awe, the massive civilian deaths that were known that were going to occur, and the acts were carried out anyway, the thousands that were killed. The rendition, the black sites of interrogation, torture, all of those things. The determination that some prisoners somehow don't deserve the Geneva Conventions, as though that's the right of some lawyer in the US Justice Department to decide that some prisoners don't deserve to be treated under the terms of the Geneva Conventions. All of these things were illegal. All of them were war crimes. There were specific war crimes that have to do with specific violations of the Geneva Conventions. The Article 33 that prohibits collective punishment. Article 29 that says that a party to the conflict, the government of one side in that conflict, is responsible for the treatment of people living under occupation, regardless of what agent of that government carries out the action. That goes to the question of command responsibility and the obligations of the commander-in-chief, and all those up and down the chain of command to be responsible for that. We saw none of that. We saw low-level accountability against 3 or 4 people in the Abu Ghraib scandal, and nothing above very few, very low-ranking soldiers. Article 47 of the Geneva Conventions that say that people that are protected under the Geneva Convention cannot be denied protection by actions taken either by the occupying force or by the government that's in place. So things like dissolving the military and sending home 300,000 former soldiers without a job, without any way to support their family, was a violation of the Geneva Conventions. All of those are talked about, not always in the context of international law, but they're talked about a lot as the legacy, as part of the legacy of the Bush administration. What's not talked about very often is what Justice Jackson, who was a Supreme Court justice, as you all know, and also served as chief prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials, what Justice Jackson called the supreme international crime. which was, of course, not a violation of the Geneva Conventions, of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which didn't exist at that time. It was the crime of aggression. That was the fundamental crime, the supreme crime from which all the others stem. And these were wars of aggression. They were not self-defense. They were, in Justice Jackson's words, the supreme international crime. They were grounded in the concept of US exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, something that has guided US foreign policy from the first settlers on this land who took it as manifest destiny, their right to slaughter native people across this land, to claim the land as their own. That we are different, we are better, we have the right to do whatever we want around the world, to take the world to war, because we have been the victims of a terrorist attack. Imagine if another country were in that situation. Let's take an attack that actually did happen years earlier, in 1976. Cuba was the victim of a terrorist attack when terrorists put 2 bombs on a civilian airliner that crashed over the Mediterranean, killed 73 people. Among them, the entire young Cuban fencing team, several government officials and other civilians were on board. It was a clear act of terror. One of the known masterminds of that terrorist act, Luis Posada Corriales, was living for many years in Miami. He was first charged at one point with an immigration violation and was briefly put under house arrest, but he was never jailed. He was never tried for the terrorist attack. What if Cuba had decided that because they had been victims of a terrorist attack, a horrific terrorist attack, that they now had the right to send drones to attack Corriales or someone else in Miami, or to take the world to war, to revenge that attack? Would we have said, well, that's their right. They have been the subject of a terrible terrorist attack, and therefore they have the right to go to war? I don't think so. I don't think that would have been our response. The US only allows itself to violate international law with impunity and to demand that the world stand with it. That was the nature of this Manichaean point of you're either with us or with the terrorists. It wasn't just about reclaiming the global solidarity that we saw during those first hours and those first days when the world said we are all Americans now. It was about saying, if you are not prepared to go to war with us, we will treat you as if you were terrorists, and we will go to war against you. It was that kind of Manichaean approach. And it has to do with this notion that we heard from George Bush. It wasn't on September 11th, it was on September 12th. It was September 12th, I would submit, that changed the world. Not September 11th. September 11th was a horrific crime, a crime against humanity. September 12th was the announcement that the response to that horrific crime would be to take the world to war. And what we heard was that the only choice we had was to either go to war or to let him get away with it. Unfortunately, we too often hear that same argument now. It wasn't true then, and it isn't true now. There is never only the choice of war or nothing. There are always a host of alternatives, and it's our job as students, as activists, as diplomats, as elected officials, to find those alternatives. And that's what didn't happen. Justice Jackson said something else at the time of Nuremberg. He said, and I quote him here, "If certain acts and violations are crimes, they are crimes whether the United States does them or whether Germany does them. We are not prepared to lay down a rule of criminal conduct against others that we would not be willing to have invoked against us." Justice Jackson was betrayed by George W. Bush and his administration. It was in the context of that refusal to acknowledge the reality of international law and the views of the rest of the world, And I know there are probably people here, either in the audience or listening on long distance, who don't believe international law really has any role to play, who don't believe in international law. And I would just say that for those of you in that position, you might want to think about one thing. Whether you want to accept the legitimacy of international law or not, frankly, doesn't matter very much, but it does matter in this sense. It is how the rest of the world views our actions. It is how the other 197 countries around the world view what we do. It is through that lens of international law and international legitimacy, or lack of legitimacy, that other people judge our actions. And it's for that reason that the legacy of George W. Bush is going to be that of a war criminal.
Go to therealnews.com for all of our coverage of the George W. Bush president.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, I was trying to cut them off before I do the ads, you know, but basically go to their website and follow the instructions. Okay, so we've had all kinds of interesting things going on, but one of the things that we've had over the last 10 or 20 years is Alex Jones telling us that martial law is coming, you know, and everybody's been saying, well, yeah, he has some interesting facts, but, you know, his conclusions are all kind of crazy and all that. Well, yeah, until now. Now they've just released another, well, this isn't a training manual, but this is a request for realistic training or something. I forget how they worded it. Anyway, Operation Jade Helm 15, Jade Helm 15. This is not Alex Jones. I figured everybody always hears Alex Jones and then dismisses him. So this is a different person telling you about Jade Helm. He's a guy at a website called BP Earthwatch. He used to watch the BP oil spills. Anyway, just another activist. We are the resistance. We are the new media. The dinosaur media is dead. So go ahead and play Jade Helm.
More than 30 years of research on deception shows that people are quite poor at detecting deception on the basis of observing behavior.
Okay, sorry, that was a little clip from the ACLU real quick there. Okay, now we're going to the well, it's called Red Dawn, Texas and Southwest, but this is the one about the military doing training in the Southwest United States. And keep in mind, the military only trains in terrain similar to the terrain that you'll be deployed in. So when they're training in United States towns and like that, it's obvious that they're training for the enemy, and the enemy is us. Okay, go ahead and play this one.
March 17th, 2015. Guys, you're looking at a logo for an operation that's going down this summer. It's called Jade Helm, and it's called Master the Human Domain. Think about that. Master the Human Domain. Friendly name, isn't it? But it's a U.S. Army Special Ops Command operation. It's going to run for 8 weeks this summer, mostly covering the southwestern United States, our border territories, quite a wide area of impact. And I want to take a look at it, but as we read through this, keep your ears open. read between the lines, and then come into the comments section and let me know what you think about this, because two heads are better than one. We have a very intelligent group on this channel. Now, I'm going to go through the different pages of the PDF. You can read it along with me, and we'll also put a link to it in the description under the video. Again, it's U.S. Army Special Operations Command. It's an unclassified document. It says it's a request to conduct realistic military training, or RMT. Operation Jade, Helm 15. Page 2 is the purpose. It says the commander of the U.S. Army Special Ops Command seeks a written invitation and approval from local officials to conduct realistic military training, again RMT, within their jurisdictions for joint military exercise. Again, Jade, Helm, JH-15. Again, pay very close attention, especially to the most simple statements and details. That it says, what is RMT? Realistic military training is training conducted outside of federally owned property. The RMT process is designed to ensure proper coordination between Department of Defense representatives and local and regional authorities. The process includes the following measures. Now, local and regional authorities are your police, etc. And we've seen that militarization build up over the years with the big MRAPs and the equipment. And it looks to me that some of our police forces are better equipped than some of our forces overseas. They definitely have some heavy-duty gear. But it says the process includes the following measures: risk assessment, medical and communication plans. Now, I want to stop for a minute and go back up. It says proper coordination between the Department of Defense and local and regional authorities. Why would you have military training, or let's say realistic military training, that's going to involve the local authorities? It's called martial law. That's what it's a training process for. Now, the areas that I show you on this map, on a few pages down from here, there's going to be some more eye-opening information there. But let's continue. It says they're going to have licensing agreements for training areas, staging areas, role players. They go through a legal review. ID of training, staging areas, role players, airfield, drop zones, DZ and landing zones, LZ surveys. Why would you need to survey drop zones and LZs in the maps that I'm going to show you? Why would you need to ID these areas? It says, it's again reminds me of Red Dawn, except a red, white, and blue dawn, again led by the New World Order. It says letters of invitations obtained from local officials, mayor, county commission, etc., coordination with local, state, federal law enforcement, public affairs review. Guys, when they say legal review, public affairs review, it will be what they decide is legal. We've seen that in the last few years. Now, what is Jade Helm? Next page. It is a challenging 8-week joint military and interagency unconventional warfare exercise conducted throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. JH is a U.S. Special Operations Command sponsored exercise to improve the Special Ops Forces UW. Let's look in the paragraph above that. Stands for Unconventional Warfare Capability as part of the National Security Strategy, the NSS. It's gotten real strong since the World Trade Centers came down. JH will run from July the 15th through September the 15th. Now, in your comments, guys, and in your thoughts about this, think about the other things that are going on, starting from CERN to other events around the world from July 15th to September 15th, this 8-week period. What could be happening that would be not coincidental in the timing of these events? Think about that. Again, many heads are better than one especially because there's eyes everywhere now, and there's different opinions and different people with different experiences in these events and this type of event, although this one is somewhat unprecedented. Next page, who and where. Participants: U.S. Army Special Forces Command, the Green Berets, U.S. Naval SEALs, U.S. Air Force Special Ops Command, U.S. Marine Corps Special Ops Command, USMC, Marine Expeditionary Units, 82nd Airborne Division, and interagency partners. Now, that last one there is the scary part. We know the rest of these guys. Like I said, my son's Air Force. Exercise locations within Texas. And listen, this is all over the Southwest, but Texas is going to be the most heavily involved, except for one other location. But this could change rapidly. And guys, I have a bad feeling it ties in with our southern border, what's about to happen there. Maybe it's going to bust wide open, and this will stop any interstate protest. But again, they get very descriptive when they come to Texas, and reminds me of Rick Perry catching all hell when he tried to buck the present administration's immigration policy. But it says Bastrop, Smithfield, Big Springs, Caddo Lake, Caldwell, Cristoval, College Station, Del City, El Dorado, Goliad, Junction, Leakey, Menard, Mountain Home, San Angelo, San Antonio, and Victoria. Now, San Antonio is the world's largest Air Force base. That's where all of our sons and daughters that join the Air Force go to boot camp. I've been there. It's a huge base. Here is the map. You notice it's the Southwest, like I said. In the red, if you look at the Legion in the bottom left, that's hostile territory. You got there, Utah, and notice in Southern California on the Mexico border, there's an insurgent pocket. So you're going to have concentrations of troops in these areas, or it would appear so. You may see more activity. But again, the red in the Legion in the bottom left is hostile. Dark blue is permissive. That's California, Nevada, Colorado. Brown is uncertain, leaning hostile. That's New Mexico. Light blue is uncertain, leaning friendly, and that's listed as Arizona. Now, you've got participants from home stations, Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, Camp Shelby, Stennis Island. But there will be different groups, and I'm sure we won't know the full extent of the event because it would give out too much information to anyone that was not friendly to our country. Now, guys, we're patriots. We love our country. We maybe don't like some of the things that have gone on here, maybe some of the direction of the leadership, but we are patriots, and I will continue to have that attitude about this country. I love it. There's things that are kind of getting out of control, and we need to pay attention to this and think about planning in advance what would happen if some of these events came to fruition, if martial law was established to open the borders completely through. But that red map of Texas there with a circle on it sure reminds me of Rick Perry again. I just can't help it when you buck the administration in a state that's that important as far as oil, border, things like that. You're going to catch it. And we see that heavy hand in the news lately. Now, here's where we get into the hype and the flag waving, and this is where it starts to get very dangerous to me. It says, why Texas? The United States Special Ops Command has conducted numerous exercises in Texas because Texans are historically supportive of efforts to prepare our soldiers, airmen, Marines, and sailors to fight the enemies of the United States. It doesn't say foreign enemies of the United States, does it, guys? Sure doesn't. Remember the Alamo. To hone advanced skills, the military and interagency requires large areas of undeveloped land with low population densities with access to towns. The proposed areas offer the conditions conducive to quality training because of real obstacles to challenge joint and IA, and that's interagency. Remember, police, local. joining IA personnel during planning and execution of their task. These challenges include operating outside the normal support mechanisms, adapting to unfamiliar terrain, social and economic conditions, operating in and around communities where anything out of the ordinary will be spotted and reported. Locals are the first to notice something out of place. Again, read between the lines. The opportunity to work with civilians to gain their trust and an understanding of the issues. Why do we need to understand the military issues here? Again, think about these issues. Now, the impact area. Over 1,200 service members will participate in Jade Helm 15 throughout Texas. Now, that's Texas. To include the training unit, operational support personnel, and opposing force personnel. I guess this opposing force deal is against civilians. Anticipate minimal physical impacts on a given area due to the large area of operations. Now back to the flag waving. Funding identified for this portion of the exercise will go straight into the economy in the way of supplies, food, fuel, FEMA lodging and services for exercise participants. Estimated economic impact of Jade Helm is approximately $150,000 into the local economy. Ooh, you can maybe buy another MRAP. Now, what to expect? Of course, at the top, increased military presence, increased aircraft in the area at night. You may receive noise complaints. Some individuals may conduct suspicious activities designed to prepare them for complex environments overseas. Local LEOs or law enforcement officials are fully aware of the exercise. Local footprint will be 60 to 65.
Okay, we're just curtailing that one just a little bit early so that we can go into this next one. Joe Biggs, Sergeant Joe Biggs, he's now working for Infowars.com, and he was the one who broke the story on this training exercise. So we're going to go straight into the Joe Biggs one right now. So we'll be back in... I won't be back. This is the end of the show after this video is over.
What did it say?
And see you next Saturday.
Many will report these.
I'm Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, U.S. Army retired veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. Now I'm here today to dismantle the lies, propaganda, and just blatant BS put out by the mainstream media, the Pentagon. All these different sources are just clearly lying about this Operation Jade Helm 15. Now, first off, I want to talk about the Army Times. Now, in the Army Times, it says that Joe Biggs is cited as a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq and said that exercises would prepare troops to throw citizens in FEMA camps. I'm cited as a U.S. Army veteran. Hello, you guys have written about me before. You can actually go Google my name with Army Times and pull up an article that you yourself did. Hello, you might want to go fact check yourself before you wreck yourself. You guys are supposed to have our backs. I'm a veteran. I actually have a Purple Heart. Do you know what that is? You obviously don't know what a veteran is. This is a Purple Heart. So now we're going to talk about the BizPac Review article. It says that we call this basically a secret document that proved to be bogus, but it hasn't slowed down the storm of conspiracies. Well, if you go back to March 23rd of last week, there's a video where I bring this Jade Helm 15 document to Alex. We sit down here at the news desk and we discuss what's going on. And in the video, you can clearly see that it says unclassified. Not once have we said secret document in any video. It's not secret. It's been hiding in plain sight for anyone to find, except most people don't know what to look for, and if they did see something like that, they wouldn't know what they were looking at.
We get sent by one of our sources, I'll leave it at that, that, hey, this is hidden behind a firewall, but it's unclassified. They're supposed to be releasing this. A little bird just put it on Scripps, the big document site. So that's a trick. When something's supposed to be declassified, they'll still hide it. So now for 4 or 5 days, they've had the different publications, Stars and Stripes, military.com, and others going, we don't know if the document's real, but these conspiracy theorists, claim that we want to take over Texas and Utah this summer in martial law. We're not going to have martial law this summer.
You notice how they don't deny the operation, though, whatsoever? They just keep trying to, move the attention away from the fact that that's going on and just keep throwing out the conspiracy term and keep attacking us, so it takes people's attention off of the fact that there is a mission going to happen, just like it says in the documents. They're not denying it.
And then you got contacted by one of your friends that you served with saying, shut up, it's a psyop, get you none of your business.
Yeah. And that's the reason why it's getting this kind of coverage, because there is underlined hidden messages in this document. The Pentagon keeps attacking us, coming after us, claiming that we said this is secret. So now we're going to take a look at Fox News. And in their article, it says Pentagon and local law enforcement are trying to knock down the rumors and let everyone know that the feds have no plan to take over Texas. Well, last night on the Kelly File, Megyn Kelly was talking to a reporter out of L.A., Chase Gallagher.
While the military says it's just training soldiers for the realities of war, critics say the Army is preparing for modern-day martial law. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with the story. Trace?
And they joke back and forth and banter. They would not once mention the fact that Alex Jones or myself or InfoWars broke this story, brought it to the attention of the American people. All they did was just call us some conspiracy group out of Austin, Texas, or something like that. This is out of control. They are blatantly lying, saying that we said it was a secret document when we never said that whatsoever.
Well, that hostile characterization didn't sit well with a far-right radio host in Austin who told his listeners that he had access to the secret document that details a federal takeover in Texas. A libertarian website also picked up on the plan, and before you know it, rallies were being held against the event. But apparently the so-called secret document was published weeks ago in several local newspapers, letting the public know the training was in the works. Still, the Pentagon and local law enforcement are trying to knock down the rumors, trying to let everyone know that the feds have no plans to grab the Lone Star State. Apparently this kind of stuff just doesn't play very well in Texas.
Now, they refuse to link to our videos. Last night, Alex Jones actually did a video which outlines with proof what is happening, the plan to condition the American public into accepting this military presence on the streets. Now we're going to look at an article from the Dallas Morning News. It says the U.S. Army Special Operations Command has an upcoming training exercise so covert, there was a press release about it 2 days ago. Well, first of all, this goes back to the whole thing saying that we said it was secret. We never said it was secret. We showed you the document where it says unclassified. This is where it actually gets interesting. Now it says, despite assurances that the training is to prepare troops for overseas missions, Army documents in the past have made clear that plans for martial law are in place for within the continental United States. Now, a leaked 2012 U.S. Army Military Police Training Manual entitled Civil Disturbance Operations describes how soldiers would be ordered to confiscate firearms and kill American dissidents. The manual also revealed that prisoners would be detained in temporary internment camps and re-educated to gain a new appreciation of U.S. policies in accordance with, now this is the key part, the U.S. Army FM Field Manual, in case you don't know what FM is, 3-19.40, Internment Resettlement Operations. Hello, these are the documents that the military is putting out. We link to this kind of information at InfoWars. We don't just make this stuff up. This is what we do. We don't use teleprompters. We actually go out there and do research about what it is that we talk about. Now, it goes on to say that Jade Helm has also drawn comparisons to a 2012 scenario outlined by retired Army Colonel Kevin Benson, in which the U.S. military is used to crush an insurgent rebellion overseen by Tea Party militia members who are going to take over a city of Darlington in South Carolina.
The exercise is known as Jade Helm 15, and conspiracy theorists believe it is targeting the southwest region of the United States, particularly the state of Texas. The military is denying the conspiracy, and a spokesman for the military said this exercise is routine training to maintain a high level of readiness for Army Special Operations Forces because they must be ready to support potential missions anywhere in the world at a moment's notice.
Army Lieutenant Colonel Mark Lastoria, a SOCOM spokesperson, says the notion was proposed by a few individuals who are unfamiliar with how and why SOCOM conducts training. A few individuals who are unfamiliar. In case you forgot, I'm Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, U.S. Army retired. I'm very familiar with these documents. The reason that we broke this is because I saw the underlying meaning behind it. So don't tell me or question my service. I didn't sit there and bleed for my country and watch my friends die so you can tell me that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Now we're going to go on to the next article by the Houston Chronicle, and it says, plans for a 17-city Army Special Operations exercise in Texas stirred up some ultra-right-wing fears of a government takeover in the Lone Star State. But local law enforcement says they've been long aware of this drill. They've only been talking to people within Texas since the beginning of March, so I wouldn't say this is a long-time known operation that you guys have had planned. So we'll go ahead and go past that. Now it says training exercise Jade Helm is going to assist our special operations soldiers in refining the skills needed against an ever-changing foreign threat. Well, I don't know if you guys remember when David Knight and I went to AP Hill in Virginia and showed you the training facility that has a church, a mosque, a soccer field, a subway station. Like we've always said, in the military, you train how you fight, and you train in an environment similar to the theater of operations that you will go to in combat. So why are these places popping up all over our country? A foreign threat, it looks more domestic to me. Now it says among the planned exercises, soldiers will try to operate undetected amongst civilian populations in some towns and cities where residents will be advised to report any suspicious activity. Well, guys, guess what? I accept your challenge. I'll be out there in some of those cities in camo myself, trying to find you guys, call you out, call local law enforcement, because I'm going to be a spotter. You guys remember when you went to sniper school, when the spotter sat up there and you guys shot targets and he tried to find you? That's what we're going to do. I'm also going to encourage a lot of my InfoWars listeners out there to go out to these different cities as well and see if you can spot these guys. And let's call in on them. Let's see how good these guys are, because we don't need a whole bunch of special operations commandos running around dressed in civilian attire, operating civilian vehicles, and also a bunch of guys in ghillie suits moving around through the woods doing God knows what. So far I've covered all the mainstream media lies. Now what I want you to do, I want you to go to Infowars.com. I want you to tell your friends to go there right now and go to the article Beyond Denial, Preparations for Martial Law in America, where Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones lay out all the information over the past few years, where it clearly states that the government is ramping up to do these type of missions. Now, Jade Helm 15 is something that's probably been in the works for a long time, because all this information that you can find in this article is very informative. It'll help give you a background about what this mission really is and what it is that the government's trying to do. Now, finally, I want to call out all you Pentagon propaganda pushing MSM sites out there. The reason why you guys are afraid to ever link to our information and call us by name is because you know the American people will find out the truth. You guys are all working for the military-industrial complex. You guys are all vetted in the military, and you guys get paid by these guys to push their BS. I'm an American citizen. I'm a soldier. I'm pissed off. And after this video, a lot of American citizens are going to be pissed off too. I'm Joe Biggs with